Would you believe me if I told you, in the heart of France's most opulent court, a dark secret brewed in the shadows? A secret so vile, it would shake the very foundation of the Sun King's reign. Poison. Black magic. Forbidden rituals. And at the center of it all, the royal court of Versailles. Women of power, desperate for love, willing to trade their souls for vengeance. Behind velvet curtains, in hidden chambers, a deadly network of witches and poisoners thrived. Poison, sold in the most exquisite of goblets. This was no mere scandal, it was a conspiracy that would bring down the mightiest of empires. Welcome, to Forbidden History Vault. Imagine a court so dazzling it could blind you. Versailles, the jewel of France, where power glittered like gold, and the stakes were higher than anyone dared to admit. But behind the lavish gowns and sparkling jewels, a game was being played. A game of love, loyalty, and control. A deadly game where nothing was ever what it seemed. Here, in the heart of France, power wasn't just won, it was fiercely fought for. And the prize? The Sun King himself, Louis XIV. The king whose love could make you, or destroy you. Noblewomen, once untouchable, now found themselves desperate for a place in his favor. Their hearts, their lives, even their very souls, were in the balance. Some played the game with grace, others, with ruthless ambition. Versailles, a palace of magnificence, hid its darkest secrets behind its walls, secrets that threatened not just to topple individuals, but the entire court itself. And among them, one woman would stop at nothing to keep her place by the king's side. But in this world of treachery, even the strongest bonds can be poisoned. It began with a single whisper in the dark, a boast from a woman who thought herself untouchable. Marie Bosse. A name that would soon be known throughout Paris, but for all the wrong reasons. She wasn't just a petty criminal, she was a poisoner, a woman who peddled death in the form of vials and powders to the highest echelons of society. Nobles, courtiers, the elite of Paris, all of them had tasted her deadly wares. One day, in a moment of careless pride, Bosse let slip the truth. She was no mere merchant. She was a link in a much larger, far darker chain. Word spread fast, as it always does in Paris, and soon the rumors reached the ears of the one man who could unravel it all, Laurani, the king's lieutenant. The whispers turned into an investigation. But what started as a small inquiry would quickly ignite a firestorm. Secrets would be exposed. Lives shattered. And the scandal that could bring down the Sun King's court was just beginning. Behind the velvet curtains of Versailles, there was a woman who claimed to see beyond the veil, into the very heart of fate itself. Her name was Catherine Monvoisin, but the world knew her as La Voisin. To some, she was a sorceress, to others, a healer, or even a prophetess. But to those desperate enough, she was a lifeline, a dealer in the forbidden. Fortune-telling, potions, love spells. All things that could bend the future to your will. But La Voisin's true mastery lay in darker arts, the occult, and the deadly trade of poison. And for a price, she could offer far more than visions of the future. She could offer power, control, revenge. But it wasn't just the desperate seeking her out. No. The rich, the powerful, the untouchable, they, too, lined up at her door. A powerful queen of the occult, with a client list that shocked even the most hardened of royal courtiers. La Voisin's influence stretched from the corridors of Versailles to the dark alleys where the most dangerous plots were born. She was more than just a woman. She was a conduit between this world and the next. And her most loyal clients, well, their hands would soon be stained in blood. In the hidden corners of Versailles, whispers grew darker. A woman, beautiful, powerful, yet consumed by desperation, would do anything to keep her place by the king's side. Madame de Montespan, the king's mistress, once the envy of every woman in court, now found herself sinking into the abyss. Her obsession with Louis XIV had driven her to the edge, and in that madness, she sought out the most forbidden of rituals. The Black Massachusetts. ritual so dark, it was said to summon the very forces of hell. A twisted mockery of the holy sacrament, drenched in blood, chaos, and a thirst for power. At the heart of these rituals, Louis XIV. The witch, the occult queen, whose potions and poisons had already claimed many lives. And now, Montespan's name was whispered among the conspirators. Her obsession with the Sun King reached such a fever pitch, she would risk everything to hold on to him. Even if it meant bargaining with the devil himself. Behind closed doors, the black masses continued. The candles flickered in the darkness, the chants filled the air. And Montespan? She was there, entangled in a deadly dance of power, love, and betrayal. The black masses weren't the end, they were just the beginning. Poison. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the new currency of the elite. Behind Versailles' gilded walls, noblemen and women used poison to get what they wanted: wealth, power, revenge. And it wasn't just a few, the network was vast. Wives poisoning husbands to inherit fortunes. Rivals vanishing without a trace. Lovers silenced, their deaths a quiet whisper in the court. Who was behind this deadly trade? A web of poisoners, killers for hire, peddling death to the highest bidder. This wasn't random. This was calculated. A deadly system where inheritance by poison became the ultimate shortcut to power. The poisons flowed from the shadows, and the aristocracy, hungry for more, kept buying. With every poison vial sold, the walls of Versailles began to close in. The king had to act. A special tribunal, unlike any before it, was created. The Chamber Ardente, the Court of Fire. The name alone sent chills down the spine of anyone who dared to whisper about the dark deeds unfolding in the shadows. Here, no one was safe. The accused were tortured, forced to confess to unimaginable acts. Names were dragged from their lips, names that had once held the court in awe, now they were revealed as conspirators in the deadliest game of all. Some confessed out of fear, others out of guilt, but all would face the fiery consequences of their crimes. Executions followed. The guilty were burned, hanged, or strangled, their fates sealed by their own treachery. The once mighty noble class crumbled as the flames of justice consumed them. Louis XIV, the woman who had orchestrated some of the deadliest conspiracies in France, was finally caught. Her arrest sent shockwaves through the court. But despite the pain of torture, she remained silent on the names of the powerful clients she protected. A silence that only deepened the mystery. Her trial was brutal, the flames of the stake already licking at her heels. Yet, even as death approached, she refused to betray the aristocrats who had relied on her dark services. Whispers began to spread, terrifying rumors. Of babies sacrificed in unholy rites, of satanic rituals performed to seal the fate of her victims. Her execution was swift, burned at the stake, but the questions she left unanswered would haunt the court forever. The flames that consumed Louis XIV were nothing compared to the fires of suspicion she sparked. Who else, hiding in the royal shadows, was involved in this dark web of death? He had adored her, France's most powerful mistress. Madame de Montespan, once the unrivaled star of Versailles. Elegant. Cunning. Irresistible. But now, implicated. Whispers became testimonies. Servants spoke. The rituals. The poisons. Her name, repeated again and again. And when the king was allegedly shown the evidence, everything changed. He didn't confront her. He withdrew. Coldly. Quietly. No more secret visits. No more favors. Just distance. Montespan faded from court life, her influence vanishing as fast as her rivals once had. But for Louis XIV, the scandal wasn't over. It had reached too close, too personal. The throne itself trembled. He ordered the lid slammed shut. Files sealed. Names buried. Punishments handled in shadows. The affair of the poisons wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a royal threat. And the king would stop at nothing to make sure it was never spoken of again. The king had seen enough, heard enough, and feared far too much. What began as an investigation into poison, had morphed into a mirror held up to the rot beneath the crown. Noble names, trusted allies, royal mistresses, all entangled in death and devilry. So, he did what kings do when truth becomes too dangerous, he buried it. The chamber ardente was quietly shut down. Trials ended mid-whisper. Testimonies vanished. Files sealed. Some criminals were punished. Others, protected. And the people noticed. In salons and marketplaces, they whispered, justice had not been served. That power had shielded the guilty. Paranoia lingered. Trust eroded. Poison had once flowed through the kingdom, and many feared it still did. Versailles looked clean again. But beneath the marble and gold, the rot remained. They tried to erase it, but the shadows never left. The affair of the poisons became a ghost story whispered through gilded halls. Nobles flinched at candlelight flickers. Servants refused to clean certain rooms alone. Versailles had been a palace of splendor, now it bore the stain of rituals, poison, and whispered names. Centuries passed, but the tale only grew darker. Authors spun tales of satanic rites. Films painted Versailles as a stage of corruption masked in perfume and pearls. And always, La Voisin. Monty Span. The Black Masses. The king who feared his own court. Historians ask, did the evil end? Or did it simply change form, trading potions for politics, altars for ambition? Because if magic once touched the crown, who's to say it ever truly let go? When royalty flirts with the occult, truth becomes smoke. And legend? It becomes far more dangerous. Was it ambition, heartbreak, or pure evil that drove them? Versailles has long since quieted. But the whispers never left. Black masses. Poison rings. Infants. Lovers. Witches. All sealed away, or so we're told. Because history, when buried, doesn't die, it waits. Like, and subscribe to unlock more secrets from the Forbidden History Vault. And remember, some vaults were sealed, for a reason.